Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Metroid Prime Remastered. In the last part, we went about traveling through Town Overworld and Chozo Ruins and into Magmoor Caverns, grabbing ourselves the Thermal Visor and Plasma Beam. And now that we got those abilities, we have more or less everything in the game we need to go grab 90% of the items in the game. So before we make our way back to the Phazon Mines, because you needed the Plasma Beam to get into the furthest portions of that, we're going to head back here to Phendrana and grab a lot of the items and artifacts that we can here, so we never have to come back here again, since, you might as well. Theoretically, I could have saved this for after the Phazon Mines, because Phazon Mines, if you use the exit that you come across at the very end of the area, it does bring us basically right next to the elevator I took to get here at the end of last part. But I figured I was here anyway, might as well. I missed that particular missile on so many playthroughs of Prime. Like, I've had a lot of playthroughs of Prime where I end at like 98% items. And when I'm already that far in, I'm like, well, I'm not going to go look for the one I'm missing. It's probably already all the way out of the way. And it's been that missile tank in the Thardus battle room so many times, because it's like the only time, barring like the Plated Beetle battle room where we got the Morph Ball and the missile right where we get the bombs from the incinerator drone, where there is an item actively hidden in the same room as a boss fight. So most of the items that we haven't been able to get yet are over near where we got the gravity suit, like this energy tank. And in particular, there's an artifact out this direction that is the best to get right now, as well as an artifact we have to get back towards the main portion of Phendrana Drifts we started in. With that said, you're going to want a power bomb or two for this, in particular. But, well, let me restart that sentence. You're going to want a power bomb for this, but if you don't have any with you, for one thing, don't worry about having to grind for it. Enemies might drop it along the way. But also, one of the items we're here to grab is a power bomb expansion to begin with, and the thing I haven't talked about when it comes to getting expansions, it doesn't increase your ammo capacity by 5, it also well, it does that. It doesn't just do that, rather. It also increases the ammo you currently have on hand by 5. And the same applies to power bomb expansions. If you have no power bombs, but you grab an expansion, congrats, you have a power bomb now. And that could have saved me some time for what's coming up, but it's neither here nor there. For one thing, we want to slide across this glider, and that allows us to shoot a missile at a stalactite in this room. This is the last stalactite in the game, by the way, in the case you haven't gotten that scan yet, so make sure you do it. And that'll allow us to grab the missile tank we saw here as early as the part after we fought Thardus. No, that's probably 2 parts after we fought Thardus now I think about it. Just needs to not be, you know, the ice spreader. There we go. If there's anything I think Prime and Prime 2 need in retrospect, it's not only a way to tag your map in any regard in case you see an item but you can't grab it yet. In fact, I'm really surprised that with them having that in, I think, Samus Returns and Dread, that they didn't add it to Remastered. Or at the least, like, a way to mark items you haven't gotten yet once you're down to a certain amount. Sort of like what happens after you beat the game, and I think Zero Mission and Fusion both do that. Or I think Prime 3 outright just has computers you can investigate to mark where items you haven't gotten are on your map for a region. And that could have helped this a lot. And I guess the big thing is, like, where would you put that in some cases? That wouldn't be, like, too early in the game. And that's a fair thing. Like, maybe if there was, like, a room they could add to Phazon Mines that marked where space pirates hit a lot of items through areas, or... Yeah, no, that's really about all you could do. It's either that or stuff in the frigate Orpheon could mark where it is after you reach the crashed frigate. I guess that does come down to some weird stuff with this game, whereas this is called Metroid Prime Remastered, but I've been calling it a remake, and that's mostly for geometry and minor mechanic overhauls that they did to help smooth things out between changing around some damage values and collision. But this is closer to what I would usually define as a remaster, which just gets into the whole muddied lines between those two terms in the gaming sphere. But I'll get onto that tangent again, actually, in a moment, because we're coming up on the big thing. Now, obviously, there's a hint talking about where to find this back at the temple, but one of the worst hidden artifacts in the game is right here. Can't scan this, but if we use the X-ray visor, there's a door. I think it's a plasma beam door, but you can't scan it to indicate that that wall is made of anything. It's made of bendesium. And I guess in some regards they do kind of teach you that walls that you can use the X-ray visor on are made of magnesium through not only the room with the the X-ray visor in it, as well as some other walls rather that do that throughout the rest of the game just about. But it's something about this wall in particular just irks me, and I wish they had a way to actively mark it. To their credit, the hint for that artifact basically says, check for the unseen door in the Phendrana's Edge, just about, which is the name of the room we're in right now, but... man, don't like that. And since I just got that Powerbomb expansion, I can open that. I just forgot that getting a Powerbomb expansion actually gives me a Powerbomb. So we'll actually be jump cutting back to this room in a few minutes, just to save some time on backtracking to it. So going back to the tangent I was saying, a lot of people like, for instance, like the Resident Evil remakes because those are very high quality and they don't change the brass tacks of the story, but they change enough about the games mechanically and give something of a new experience that makes them worth playing on top of the originals as well. And I agree with that. I think the Resident Evil remakes have room for the original games as well as the remakes. But then you get remakes that just try to outright replace but don't do enough differently, and this technically falls into that, so does Maverick Hunter X in a lot of regards, barring the Vile mode. And then you get into the whole port versus remaster deal, which is an entirely different can of worms because of what porting games from older consoles tends to do to their visuals to begin with nowadays. I'm of the mindset that I prefer if a game is going to be marketed as a remake, that it does a lot differently, or at least has been long enough since a version of it has been released that it feels worthwhile. Like in the case of Metroid Prime here, it's, in my definition, a remake because it's the first time we've gotten a version in Metroid Prime 1, since the Wii U, because Prime Trilogy was on that, but that was just a technical virtual console release of the Wii release, which was like 2009 or 10 or 11, one of those 3 years. But them saying they're remaking The Last of Us, for instance, I find a little weird, because while they added a lot of minor visual touches to that game, and they added a lot of accessibility stuff, it's them up-resing a game from less than a decade prior, and it just feels weird. I guess in some regard that is, I feel like something that the gaming sphere should do as a whole is standardize a lot of terminology like that so that it's more consistent, like maybe the ESRB comes together or something, or major gaming news outlets to say, a remake is when it does this, a remaster is when it does that, but even then, that opens a can of worms of people disagreeing with it and all that, and I think I've even gone on this similar tangent in other remakes I've done, like Maverick Hunter X versus Powered Up for Mega Man, because those I think are a very good indication of a very content-filled, passionate remake and what is otherwise just a visual upgrade. Alright, here we are back at that door, time to use a power bomb on it, and there we go. Artifact number 6 for this playthrough, I think? They do number the artifacts, but I don't think the number actually matters to what order you can get them in. It's just which one they are in the sequence. Yeah, that's number 11, and that is our 7th one, actually. Yeah, that's right, because the 6th one I think we got this playthrough was the one in the room with the thermal visor. And the one before that was the... Yeah, that makes sense, that makes sense. Having to remember how my footage goes as I watch it. That's how it works, right? So with our business done here at the Phendrana's Edge region, we're actually good to move on to our next destination, which is actually to head back to the Space Pirate base here in Phendrana, because there is a single item, an artifact, that they tell you about pretty directly in the wording of, for the hint for this, that we need to get about halfway through the base to see. We can go in either direction, but I would rather go from this direction because it's right here, and that way I won't have to backtrack through the same level design twice. This area is weirdly unchanged from our first visit, like, there's no new enemies, the power hasn't been restored or anything. It's kind of weird in that regard, honestly. It's like the one time they make you revisit here if you get everything on the first visit, and it's kind of weird for that factor, honestly. As for the room we need to get to the room where the Flying Pirates was introduced, up this elevator. Because up here in this room, there is a tower in the distance, right behind us, I believe. And the artifact is supposedly in that tower, but you can't get to the tower directly. So what you have to do is, and I didn't show this off on our first run through these rooms, there's little round viewing ports above the rooms where the elevators are, and in one of them there are a bunch of boxes blocking a window that is frozen over. Now that we have the plasma beam, we can melt that ice in order to fire a missile to the little orange things beyond it, which will explode and cause the artifact to be accessible to us. Also take this moment to restock if you can, because the boxes around here are really good for getting some extra health and missiles and power bombs in the case you're running low for whatever reason. So yeah, jump up here, destroy those blocks, and that actually destroyed the ice immediately. Then you fire a missile at those orange things. Wanton destruction. So this kind of gets into something I mentioned, I guess during the Phazon Mines. They talk about in the pirate logs not being able to find the artifacts when distinctly 3 of them even are in their bases in some form. Because there's this one here, and then there's the 2 in the Phazon Mines area. And I guess the implication could be that they just literally can't see the artifacts because they don't have, like, Chozo tech, or the artifacts decided are slightly sentient due to the Chozo ghosts that the pirates will now be a part of the test, or something. I don't know. I'm thinking too hard about the magic sci-fi of this world. So with that, our next destination here in the Phendrana Drifts is to head back to the temple where we fought the She-Goth for the Wave Beam. I say that actually, no, it's technically not. That is where we need to go for another thing. But there's a couple of other items we need to grab in the 2 Ice Ruins maps, west and east. And not for nothing, for the sake of streamlining, there's an item I grabbed earlier on in the LP. I think it's Ice Ruins East. The missile tank that required the spider ball. You could save that for now, just to save on visit amounts, but I got it then just because it was in the way, more or less. I'm not actually sure what the most efficient route for this game is. And there's the last power bomb expansion. If you've gotten all the ones I have, you should now have a max of 8 power bombs. That is as many as you'll be able to hold. And like I said earlier, for once, it's like an honestly kind of healthy amount. Because that is a big problem with Zero Mission and Fusion. One more so than the other. You get way more power bombs than you know what to deal with. Gotta love the plasma beam. Kills the security drones in like 1 to 2 shots. That's fantastic stuff. I kind of underestimated the plasma beam on my first playthrough just because it fired so slowly, but it is just so powerful. And like I said, if you can get this early in the game via some sequence breaking in any of the versions, you can actually use this against Stardust for some really high extra damage. That said, I believe, like most beams, not very useful against the She-Goth. It does kind of highlight, though, a little bit of a weird thing about the Prime series graphically. Samus has some kind of weird proportion to begin with, and I'm not just talking about, like, where do her shoulders fit and all that, even though she's probably just got some broad shoulders. The power suit design in particular, as well as the later versions of it, Samus' suit period. The arm cannon is spectacularly huge in this design for some reason, and it's always kind of big to begin with. But it just seems particularly large for how spindly her limbs tend to be in the Prime trilogy. Soon-to-be tetralogy. Again, I will laugh if by the time this comes out, because this should be coming up around E3 season, that either we've gotten a Prime 2 remaster announcement already, or if Prime 4 finally got a trailer. Because I've had weirder times where game announcements happen as I'm doing things. Like, I remember distinctly, there's even video proof of this. Back when I was doing an old Metroid marathon, I think it's when I finally went to 100% Zero Mission Fusion. I think it's when I did Metroid 2 and AM2R. During my AM2R recording is when Samus Returns got announced, and yeah, that was good stuff. Even did a little bit of a minor review because I had played the game by then by the time it got uploaded, I think. So our duty here in the shrine is to hit this and melt that water. Or I guess melt that ice. You can't melt water, you evaporate it. And now we got a little more false slot. With that, we can roll into here for the last artifact in Phendrana Drifts. If you've done everything we have, you should now have all of the items in Phendrana Drifts, barring one missile tank that's in the main hub room for the first visit. which I will grab on the way out because I almost forgot to grab it, admittedly. You'll even see me kind of turn around going, wait, forgot one thing. So I could see if I remember correctly, I was like looking at my missile count like 205 out of 250. There's this many here, that many there. I missed the one here. Which one am I missing? Right. I guess that's something else the game could have used for Remastered is just like a tally once you're down to like the last 25% of the items of how many are in a region and how many you have out of them. Not where they are, just the tally so you know how many to look out for around there. Because I think a lot of these types of games need that kind of, not guiding, but at least like checklisting to help figure stuff out, even if it's only on a repeat playthrough. So from here, our next destination is technically to head back to the Phazon Mines. But the way I'm going to be taking to get there is by using the elevator found within the Magmore Caverns, because there's a couple of items near that elevator in Talon Overworld we can now grab with the Plasma Beam as well as the X-Ray Scope. Or X-Ray Visor. I guess not for nothing. The X-Ray Visor, you get it pretty late in the game, all things considered, but it at least is more useful in what it tries to do than the X-Ray Scope was in Super. Because the X-Ray Scope in Super, once you know where the items are for 100%, like, that thing just never gets useful again. The X-Ray Visor between the platforms that move and the Chozo Ghosts, as well as two other particular uses we have yet to see, particularly in boss fights, it actually gets to be worth its while in comparison. I do think some of the later Prime games have more interesting and original ideas for visors, but sometimes the way those ones are used are a little inconsistent to begin with. Like you get one visor in Prime 2 a little too late for it to be super useful outside of the key hunt, which is not a good way to make that thing useful for my eyes. And Prime 3's got the ship visor that is really cool, but you might miss how it can be useful for a lot of the game just because so many of the rooms you can use it in, you might just be focusing on locking onto enemies to begin with. So, there's actually a missile tank hidden in this room, and it's one that's kind of easy to miss if you're just looking at the next door. And admittedly, this is another room where you could probably figure out that there's going to be some sort of X-ray visor-esque thing later in the game, because you got this gigantic span here, and no way to jump out across it besides this. I guess technically if you had, maybe you were playing this and had played other Metroid games first, your first thought could be, ooh, maybe the space jumps in the game. But if you figure out that those platforms there, you might be able to find this missile tank kind of early if you're really good at predicting where to jump. For now, though, we can just come over here for yet another missile tank. Let's see, this is number 220. 6 more of these to go, and then we're maxed out. And, if memory serves, yeah, it could be a 225 right now. I believe there are 5 in just the final portion of the Phazon Mines. So you can be pretty close to done by now. You could leave Phazon Mines with literally all the missiles in the game if you had gotten all the ones, including the one I have missed so far, repeatedly. Alright, while we're on the way to the Phazon Mines, let's finally remember to scan our ship. Cool? Cool. Took 12 out of 15 parts, but we finally did it. That is one of those things where I just completely forgot to do it because it's there for so much of the game. Like, I mostly remember the new enemies I come across, of course, but the missable scans, just because they're only there for so long. And I'm gonna need to remember to do that in all the games because Samus's ship is a scan, I think, at multiple points in each of the Prime games moving forward. Especially Prime 2, because Prime 2 likes to give multiple enemies multiple scans for some reason. I immediately think of the boss of the third region. Like the third of the major regions, not like counting the hub. I think that thing has 3 or 4 separate scans, one of which when it is stunned from you doing a certain thing, which is really annoying. And since we have to get back to Phazon Mines through the Frigate Orpheum with the way I'm going about this, I'm just gonna speed through here. We've already been here, there's nothing new to grab. Again, Aqua Drones were temporary, so if you missed that scan, bad news. And here we are once again. Hope you're ready to spend a lot of next part here, because I don't even remember if we actually leave here next part. I think we technically literally leave here next part, but more on that then. Admittedly, there is something you can take advantage of, and I'll talk about this again early next part just to remind you. You can take advantage of a nice little shortcut here if you're not going for all the items. You might remember that crane we moved on our first visit to the Phazon ruins. You can now use that as a grapple point to get towards where the little 3-section rotating tower you move with the bombs can be. Just to cut out the first portion, but there's items for us again in the first portion of Phazon Mines, so we need to go through there again anyway. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 13, we once again trek through the Phazon Mines to see what now awaits us now that we have the Phazon Beam. See you guys then.